You know, Pedro, we talked just before the break, and you pointed out that there's a misconception that the influx of Latinos are costing the majority population around here, the ethnically white population, to not have jobs. And as a businessman, can't think of anything further from the truth. Ada Velez came to work for me about 6 years ago to help me out with my translations, because we didn't have a Spanish speaker on my staff, I'm embarrassed to say. And Ada has been with me for 6 years. As a result, we've hired a second translator. As a result, we've hired another lawyer. As a result, our business has grown. And, you know, we were talking at the break, just yard care, because that's one place we see a lot of Latino workers. The guy who owns a yard care company 10 years ago had one little lawnmower and he'd go out and cut it himself. Now he's got 10 guys working for him. He's got 20 lawnmowers, 3 trucks, and guess what? Every time he buys a truck, he's helping the local economy. Every time he buys a new lawnmower, he's helping the local economy. And that's making jobs for other businesses, all because we now have a workforce that can start to integrate themselves into the community. Am I right?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, any region, for any, I'm also a business owner, a ready workforce is what you need. The idea is that a ready workforce means a workforce that is willing to do the work that's available for the wages that are offered. I mean, as businessmen, we have to think of costs if we're going to be in business. So the issue there is that once you have that ready workforce, say what you mentioned, the language issue. Now that may be a barrier within that situation, but again, what you just mentioned, it creates opportunities, because what you do is, as you bring in more skilled workers, the added value that they bring to the workplace is the ability to be bilingual, to be culturally sensitive to that workforce, so that way the people that you do bring in feel accepted, and you can communicate with them, particularly with issues of safety and things like that, because you want to make sure that people understand how not to get hurt.
One of the things that touched me deeply about 10 years ago, I had a young college student work for me who was bilingual. And she was so frustrated that, in fact, the hospitals would call her to come in, because there was no one on our hospital staffs 10 years ago who could speak Spanish, so that a mother who came in with a child that may have appendicitis, no one could properly diagnose them, because, she'd come in and she was a wonderful young lady, and come in the morning and just rant about how our society here in northeastern Pennsylvania was not as welcoming as we should be. And the same was true. I represented a young fella from Guatemala who was beaten senselessly by a couple fellas that were from Mexico. And it was a bad fight in a cab. But this guy the police never took a police report, because nobody could speak. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Nobody could interview him. I mean, those kind of things, fortunately, are in our past. But hopefully, we won't see that in the future in other communities, because it's so important that we be available to welcome people and to make them a part of our community.
Right, and again, it goes back to the issue of what are the barriers, and if language is one of those barriers, I can a misconception is that new immigrants do not want to speak English, and that's that's pretty ludicrous. I tell you, in all of our English as a second language programs that we have across the colleges and universities, there are huge waiting lists. Folks want to learn English. They want to be able to navigate through all the systems, to be able to apply for work and be respected in that sense. So that they're going to learn, and the biggest I think contribution that businesses and agencies can do is to be more proactive in actually training their people in terms of Spanish, for example, as an example. So that way they can meet halfway with that. Folks will learn English. If they understand Spanish, you kind of meet halfway. And usually when it comes to dialogue and food, If you share those two things, you break any barrier.
You know, several years ago when I was on the Scranton School Board, our superintendent of schools brought to the board an idea that I thought was terrific. I don't know whether it was implemented, but I know at that time it was implemented in at least one school, and that was teaching Spanish at the first grade level.
Yes.
And I can remember a director saying, well, wait a minute, why do we want to teach our kids to speak Spanish? And I immediately said, because I'd hire someone tomorrow in my office that can speak Spanish and speak English. It's the most important thing to have the ability to communicate in more than one language. And I hope those programs do exist, because the American people are so pedestrian when it comes to learning another language or learning the geography of another country. It's amazing when you travel in even Canada or Mexico or Europe, how poorly we're respected by the rest of the world because we don't know anything about them. And it's one of the problems I think we face in this country today. Tell me a little bit about the direction that LAANEPA is taking in our community now.
Pretty much along those very lines. I can tell you that when it comes to issues of the Latino Community Services Office, which is it's a grant-funded community service block grant in the Poconos in Monroe County, to the commissioners who have been very generous with us. Through that Latino Community Services Office, what it allows us to do is to not only be the advocate for those clients that are limited English proficient, but it allows us to help those agencies who really could not afford to bring on full-time employees because they don't they're not able to meet that. So in issues of healthcare, for example, Pocono Medical Center, I'm very proud of the fact that we have a joint grant with Pocono Medical Center to do their Hispanic outreach. So through the Wellness Center and Beth Taylor, that's extremely important for us. The Step Up to Leadership program, we're very determined to develop tomorrow's leaders today. We've had over 100 graduates of the Step Up to Leadership program, and that, again, consistent with our mission, it is not for Latino kids. All kids of all backgrounds come together and really think through current issues and solutions as part of their leadership learning and doing projects along. So Step Up to Leadership is absolutely one of our most important missions. The community health is extremely important, and we mitigate that through language when it's needed. And of course, many employers come to us in construction and those types that are looking for a pool of employees to hire. So they see that as a pretty big value.
When we come back, Pedro, I want to talk a little bit about the problems that the Latino employee faces,
okay,
with language barriers, with safety, and with wage theft. So please stay tuned to You Be the Judge.